There are 2 days that redefine a man's life. The day he builds his empire, and the day he discovers the 2 people he trusts most in the world, his wife and his business partner, are plotting to burn it all down with him inside. My story begins on that second day. If you believe that betrayal should never go unpunished, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss how this ends. They say every empire is built on a foundation of sacrifice. For me, that foundation was time. Years of it. 17-hour days that bled into sleepless nights. Fueled by stale coffee from the office machine and the unwavering belief that I could code a new reality for myself. And I did. Apex Innovations wasn't just a company. It was a testament to a kid from the rough side of Denver who saw the world in lines of logic and refused to accept the variables he was given. From my office on the 50th floor, the city sprawled below me, a glittering circuit board of my own success. At night, the streams of headlights looked like data packets flowing through the city's arteries, and I felt like I could see the whole system, understand it, control it. The quiet hum of the servers in the building's core was a lullaby. The smell of worn leather from my chair, the solid, cool weight of the lacquered mahogany of my desk under my palms, these were the sensory proofs of my achievement. I had built my fortress, solid, secure, impenetrable. And inside that fortress, the reason for it all, was my entire world, my wife, Eleanor, and our 8-year-old daughter, Olivia. That evening, the fortress felt warm, alive. The sterile, climate-controlled air of the office was the first thing to vanish as I walked through the front door. It was replaced by the chaotic symphony of home, the distant sound of a cartoon on television, the clatter of a pot in the kitchen, and the scent of rosemary and roasting chicken. It was a smell that meant I was no longer a CEO. I was just a husband, a father, dad. A small hurricane of blonde hair and unbridled joy slammed into my legs before I'd even managed to set my briefcase down. I let out a theatrical grunt, pretending the impact had winded me, and scooped Olivia up into a hug that felt like plugging my soul into a charger. Her laughter was the only currency that mattered, a sound that could erase deficits of sleep and energy. "Hey, princess," I said, kissing a forehead that smelled faintly of crayons and playground dust. "Did you save any trouble for me? Or did you give it all to your mom today?" She giggled, her eyes wide and earnest. "No trouble. I finished all my homework. Even the long division misses Gable gave us. It was super hard. She said I was a diligent student." Olivia puffed out her chest with pride. "Since I was so diligent, can we go to the big park on Saturday? The one with the super high swings and the splash pad?" "It's a deal." He promised. "Saturday morning. We'll swing so high, your feet will touch the clouds. Now, go see if your mom needs a hand setting the table." As Olivia scampered off, Eleanor emerged from the kitchen. She was wiping her hands on a linen apron tied neatly around her waist. A picture of effortless grace. Her beauty still had the power to stop me in my tracks. The same way it did a decade ago, at a stuffy university gala where I was a nervous nobody and she was everything. She smiled. A perfect, practiced curve of her lips, but lately, I'd noticed it rarely reached her eyes. "Honey, you're home," she said. Her voice was smooth, melodic. She came forward and gave me a kiss. It was brief, our lips cool, a gesture more of habit than affection. "Tough day." "The usual fires," I said. trying to catch her eye. "We can talk about it later. How was your day?" "Oh, you know, errands. A call about the charity auction." She turned back toward the kitchen before I could respond. "Dinner's almost ready. Go wash up." We ate together at the long oak table in the dining room. A perfect portrait of the American dream. I talked about a potential acquisition, trying to simplify the corporate jargon. Olivia, bless her heart, gave a minute-by-minute account of her school day, complete with impersonations of her friends. And Eleanor. Eleanor was a ghost at the feast. She nodded. She smiled. She asked the right questions. "And what did his mother say?" "That sounds exciting." "Dear." But her engagement was a veneer. Her eyes had a distant glaze. As if she were watching our family dinner from a great height, I watched her push a piece of chicken around her plate with her fork, creating little patterns in the sauce. I told myself it was stress. The charity auction she was co-chairing was a massive undertaking. I told myself she was tired. I told myself 1,000 things to avoid the one simple truth. She was drifting away from me, and I had no idea why. Later, after a hard-fought negotiation over bedtime, I was tucking Olivia into her bed. We were halfway through her favorite book, the one about a dragon who learns to bake, when Eleanor's phone, which she'd left on the hallway table, began to buzz. Not a ring, but a persistent, low vibration. I finished the chapter, kissed Olivia goodnight, and walked out into the hall. The buzzing stopped. I saw Eleanor through our slightly ajar bedroom door. She was standing with her back to me, phone pressed tight to her ear. Her posture was rigid, coiled like a spring. Her voice was a venomous whisper, a sound so unlike her, it made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Not now. I told you. The risk is too high. Yes. Everything is on schedule. The final transfer has to wait. Just be ready." There was a pause. I held my breath, my feet rooted to the floor. The house was utterly silent except for the frantic beating of my own heart. Her voice returned, softer this time, but laced with an unnerving intimacy. "I will. Just be careful. I can't do this without you." She ended the call, and for a second, she just stood there. Her shoulders slumped. I must have made a sound, a shifting of weight, because she spun around. A cascade of emotions played across her face in a split-second raw panic. Then guilt. Then a sudden, chilling composure. Her social mask, the one she wore for board members and society wives, snapped perfectly into place. "Rufus, you scared me half to death," she said, her laugh a little too bright, a little too brittle. She placed a hand over her heart. "Who was that?" I asked. My voice came out flat, heavier than I intended. "Oh, just Sarah," she said immediately, waving a dismissive hand as she placed the phone face down on her nightstand. "You know how she gets completely overwrought about the silent auction items for the gala. It's a 5-alarm fire with her every night." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, and I knew it was a lie, because I'd had lunch with Sarah's husband 2 days ago. He'd mentioned they were flying to Aspen for the week. A cold, sharp knot of dread formed in my gut. But what could I do? Accuse her? Start a fight based on a tone of voice and a half-heard conversation? My mind, the logical, analytical machine that built my empire, rejected the idea. I needed data. I needed proof. Without it, suspicion was just an poison I'd be feeding myself. "Right," "Sarah," I said, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "Well, I'm exhausted. I'm turning in. Good night." "Honey," she said, already turning away, her back a wall between us. The distance in her voice wasn't just exhaustion, it was a chasm, and I, standing on the edge of it, chose to turn around and pretend it wasn't there. The knock on the door came at 2:17 a.m. It wasn't a tap. It was a hard, percussive bang that tore through the deep silence of the house. I was instantly awake, my heart launching itself against my ribs. My first thought, a primal parental fear, was Olivia. I swung my legs out of bed. The cold of the hardwood floor, a jolt to my system. I instinctively reached for Eleanor, my hand slapping against empty, cool sheets. The covers were thrown back as if she'd left in a hurry. I assumed she'd gone to the bathroom or to get a glass of water. Downstairs. The knocking came again. Louder this time. Demanding. I padded out of the room, my mind thick with sleep. As I descended the grand, curving staircase, I saw it, the rhythmic, disorienting pulse of red and blue lights, washing over the family photos on the wall, turning our smiling faces into grotesque masks. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I unlatched the heavy oak door and pulled it open. 2 police officers stood on my porch, their breath misting in the cold night air. The older one had the weary, hollowed-out eyes of a man who had delivered bad news for a living. The younger one was stiff, his face a carefully neutral mask. "Mr. Rufus King," the older officer asked, his voice gravelly. "Yes. What is this? What's happened?" He took a slow, deliberate breath, his gaze shifting to a point just over my shoulder. "Sir, I'm very sorry to inform you. We received a call about an hour ago. There's been an accident on Mountain Pass. A single vehicle. The car is registered to your wife, Eleanor King." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. It was a severe crash. "Sire, there were no survivors. I'm very sorry for your loss." The world tilted. The words were English, but the sentence was an alien language my brain refused to parse. No survivors. It was a line from a movie, not something a man says on your doorstep, while the lights of his car paint your walls. A high-pitched ringing started in my ears, thin and sharp. "No," I said, the word coming out as a croak. I cleared my throat. "No. You've made a mistake. That's not possible. My wife is here. She's upstairs. She's sleeping." The 2 officers exchanged that look, that sad, knowing glance reserved for the grieving and the delusional, the look that said, "Here we go." "Sir," the older one said gently, like he was talking a man down from a ledge, "we've made a positive identification of the vehicle. We understand this is a shock. Perhaps you should go and check upstairs." I didn't need any more prompting. I turned and ran, my mind a blank wall of roaring static. I pounded up the stairs, my bare feet slapping against the wood, the sound echoing in the cavernous silence. A single, desperate prayer looped in my head. Let him be wrong. Let this be a mistake. A dream. Anything. I burst into our bedroom, flipping on the main light. The sudden glare was blinding, and the sight before me was one of absolute, terrifying emptiness. Her side of the bed was pristine. The pillows plumped but unslept in. The duvet was pulled back, just as I'd seen it before. "Eleanor," I called out, my voice sounding thin and strange. I threw open the bathroom door. The marble was cold and vast. The air smelled of her jasmine perfume. A cruel, lingering ghost. Her robe was on its hook, her toothbrush in its holder, but she wasn't there. I checked the walk-in closet, frantically pushing aside her dresses and blouses. Their familiar textures, a torment under my fingers. Empty. The buzzing in my ears intensified. The fortress was gone. The foundation had vaporized. I was in free fall. I stumbled back to the bedroom and sank onto the edge of the bed. My head in my hands. My mind was scrambling, desperately trying to find a logical sequence, an explanation that wasn't the one the police had given me. And then I saw it. The cool, blue glow of the tablet on my nightstand. The Apex Secure system. My system. My logic. My truth. My hands were shaking so violently it took 3 tries to unlock the screen. I pulled up the camera logs, my heart hammering against my ribs. I scrolled back. 1:23:0 a.m. Nothing. 1:2:45 a.m. Nothing. And then, at 1:08 a.m., an event marker. The main hallway. I tapped it. The footage flickered to life. And there she was. Eleanor, dressed not for bed, but in jeans, boots, and a dark jacket. She moved with a strange, deliberate stiffness, her face set and unreadable. She didn't look back. She walked straight to the garage entrance, keyed in the code, and slipped out into the darkness. The door hissed shut behind her. I played it again, and again. I zoomed in on her face. There was no fear there, no distress. There was resolve. I slowed the footage down. I watched her walk, frame by frame. Something about her gait was wrong. It was too rigid, too controlled. It was the walk of an actor hitting their mark. That's when the fragments began to collide in my mind. The hushed, intimate phone call. The smooth, practiced lie about Sarah. The emotional Grand Canyon that had opened up between us over the past few months. Her leaving without a note, without a sound. In the dead of night. And now, the police at my door with an impossible story. The grief was still there. A cold, heavy stone in my gut. But something else was rising up through it. Something sharp and analytical. A deep, chilling sense of wrongness that went far beyond a tragic accident. I felt like a character in a play, reading my lines without ever having seen the script. My hand went to my phone, but I didn't dial 9 centimes. I didn't call her parents to deliver the horrific news. I called the only person I knew who could navigate the darkness with me. The only person whose foundation was built on the same bedrock as my own. He answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Rufus, it's 2 a.m. What's wrong?" "Leo," I said, my own voice, a stranger's. A cracked and brittle thing. "It's me. I need you here. Right now. Something terrible has happened." My brother, Leo, was at my house in less than 20 minutes. He wasn't just my brother, he was my opposite. Where I built systems in the clean, sterile world of code. He navigated the messy, unpredictable systems of human behavior. He was a private investigator, and his eyes saw things. Mine didn't. He walked in, took one look at my face, and his whole demeanor shifted from concerned brother to focused professional. The police were long gone. leaving behind only a case number on a small white card and a silence that was heavier and more suffocating than any sound I'd ever heard. I walked him through it, my voice a hollow monotone. The knock, the officer's words, the impossible timeline, the empty bed. I handed him the tablet, showing the security footage. He watched it once, then twice, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't offer condolences or platitudes. He just observed, processed. He paced the length of my cavernous living room, the city lights twinkling like cold, distant stars through the floor to ceiling windows. He stopped in front of the tablet again, staring at the frozen image of Eleanor's back as she disappeared into the garage. Finally, he turned to face me. His expression was grim, the kind of look a doctor gives you before he tells you the diagnosis is worse than you feared. He put a firm hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "Rufus," he said, his voice low and steady, cutting through the static in my head. "I want you to listen to me very carefully. The police are going to treat this as a tragedy." He paused, his eyes boring into mine. "But you and I, we're going to treat it as a crime scene. Because, brother, I don't think this was an accident. I think it was a dress rehearsal. A dress rehearsal." The words hung in the air of my cavernous living room, stark and cold. They sliced through the thick fog of my grief and shock, offering not comfort, but a terrifying clarity. A dress rehearsal, a practice run. It implied a main performance was yet to come. Leo's voice was steady, but I could see the muscle twitching in his jaw. This wasn't just a theory he was floating. It was a conclusion he had already reached. The world, which had been spinning in a chaotic, nauseating blur, suddenly snapped into a sharp, brutal focus. The buzzing in my ears faded, replaced by the slow, heavy thud of my own heart. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in duality. To the outside world, I was Rufus King, the grieving widower. I moved through a script written by social convention. I answered the phone, my voice a carefully constructed rasp of sorrow. I accepted condolences from business partners, from Eleanor's society friends, from the mothers of Olivia's classmates. Their words were a meaningless wash of sound shocking at tragedy. "If there's anything you need," I nodded and thanked them. My mind, a million miles away. A cold, calculating machine already running simulations. I dealt with the police, answering their gentle, procedural questions about Eleanor's state of mind, her recent activities, her plans for the night. I lied, painting a picture of a happy, stable marriage, knowing that every word was a stone being laid in a false foundation. The hardest part, the only part that threatened to shatter my composure, was telling Olivia. How do you tell an 8-year-old that her mother is gone? I sat on the edge of her bed the next morning, the cheerful sunlight streaming through her window, feeling like a personal insult. I held her small hands in mine and spoke the words that felt like swallowing glass. Mommy was in an accident. She's gone to heaven. Princess. The raw, uncomprehending pain in her eyes was a physical blow. Her tears were acid on my soul. As I held her sobbing little body, a new kind of resolve hardened within me. It was no longer just about the truth. It was about protecting this small, innocent life from the shrapnel of a war she didn't even know had been declared. While I played my public role, Leo became a ghost. He moved in the shadows I could no longer occupy. He used my resources, my money, and his own network of contacts that operated in the city's gray spaces. He was a whisper, a shadow, a data point. He didn't sleep. He lived on coffee and cigarettes, his face growing leaner and more hawkish with each passing hour. I'd get cryptic texts from him at 3 a.m., following a lead, or financials are dirty. He was my anger, given form and purpose. 2 days after the accident, he summoned me to my own office. Not my home office, but my real one, the glass and steel fortress on the 50th floor. It was a Sunday afternoon, and the building was a silent tomb. The contrast was stark. At home, the air was thick with sympathy flowers and the lingering scent of Eleanor. Here, there was only the cold, clean smell of industry and ambition. Leo was waiting for me in my office, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city. He hadn't bothered to sit. On the polished surface of my mahogany desk, he'd laid out a single, large manila envelope. He didn't say a word as I walked in. He just nodded toward the desk. My hands felt strangely disconnected from my body as I reached for the clasp. The paper was cool and smooth. I pulled out a stack of glossy 8x10 photographs. The first one was of Eleanor and Silas Thorne, my business partner, my friend, the man I'd trusted with the keys to my kingdom, sitting at a secluded table in a dimly lit restaurant. They weren't talking business. Eleanor was laughing, her head thrown back, a genuine, uninhibited joy on her face that I realized, with a punch to the gut, I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Silas's hand was covering hers on the table, his thumb stroking her knuckles. I dropped the photo as if it were burning hot. My breath hitched. "There are more," Leo said, his voice flat. I forced myself to pick up the next one. It was them, walking out of a boutique hotel on the outskirts of the city. The kind of place people go when they don't want to be seen. Eleanor's arm was linked through his. The next photo was them in his car, kissing. Not a friendly peck, but a deep, passionate kiss. The kind that speaks of a long and storied intimacy. Every photo was a nail being hammered into the coffin of the life I thought I had. The betrayal was so cliché, so mundane. And yet, it felt like a uniquely personal form of hell. This wasn't just an affair. The planned secrecy, the clandestine meetings, it was a conspiracy. When I asked, my voice, a hollow rasp. 6 months. At least, Leo said. He's been cooking the books for longer. Small amounts at first. Then getting bolder. Setting up shell corporations. Routing funds through offshore accounts. The accounts were opened under a false name. He slid another document across the desk. A name that matches the alias on a new passport Eleanor had made 2 weeks ago. I sank into my leather chair. The photos spread out before me like evidence of a murder. And it was a murder. The murder of my marriage. My friendships. My trust in the world. But I still didn't have the final piece. The motive was clear: greed. Lust. But the method, the sheer cruelty of faking her own death, still felt incomprehensibly monstrous. "There's one more thing," Leo said, his voice dropping. He pulled a small digital audio recorder from his pocket and a pair of earbuds. "I got this from a bug my guy planted in Silas's office yesterday. You need to hear this for yourself." He didn't hand me the recorder. He stepped forward and put the earbuds in my ears himself. A strangely intimate gesture. As if to shield me from the world, while this final blow landed, he pressed play. There was a hiss of static, then the sound of liquid being poured. Silas' voice, smooth and confident. "To us, and to our new life." Then, Eleanor's voice, hearing it, so alive and vibrant, was a physical shock. It was a voice from the grave, plotting its own funeral. It's almost too perfect. See, the police report. The insurance payout. Are you sure he'll buy it? Rufus isn't stupid. Silas chuckled. A low, condescending sound that made my blood run cold. He's smart with numbers. Not with people. He's blinded by his own narrative. The perfect life. The perfect family. He'll grieve. He'll fall apart. And by the time he's back on his feet, we'll be gone. The company will be a hollowed-out shell. Just as long as Rufus believes you're dead, everything will be ours. I ripped the earbuds out. The silence that rushed back in was deafening. The grief, the shock, the sadness, it all evaporated in an instant, burned away by a white-hot rage, so pure and so absolute, it felt like a religious experience. It wasn't a hot, explosive anger. It was a cold fire. The kind that burns in the heart of a star. It was the moment the man who had been betrayed died. And something else, something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous was born in his place. That night, I didn't go home. I couldn't bear the sympathetic looks from the housekeeper or the scent of Eleanor that still clung to every room. I sent Olivia to stay with Leo and his wife, telling her I had urgent work to attend to. I stayed in my office. High above the sleeping city, I poured myself a glass of 25-year-old single malt. The kind I saved for closing multi-billion-dollar deals. The expensive liquid was tasteless in my mouth, like water. I stood at the window for hours, watching the data streams of headlights, but I no longer saw a system I controlled. I saw a battlefield. They thought I was a sentimental fool, a machine for making money who was blind to the world of human deceit. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my trust for stupidity. They had mistaken my love for weakness. That was their fatal error. And they would pay for it. Not with jail time. That was too simple. Too clean. They had tried to erase my world, to turn me into a ghost in my own life. I would do the same to them. I would build a new reality around them, a prison of their own making. And I would be its silent, unseen architect. My gaze fell upon the large, glossy white erase board that covered one of the walls of my office. A canvas for my corporate strategies. My grief had found its purpose. My rage had found its focus. I picked up a black, dry erase marker. The cap came off with a sharp click that echoed in the silent room. I walked to the board, and under the heading Q3 Projections, I drew a single, clean line through the words. Then I began to write. The first box I drew said, Phase 1, The Ghost. The plan poured out of me. A torrent of cold, crystalline logic. It was the most complex system I had ever designed, with human variables, fail-safes, and contingency plans. My handwriting was sharp and precise. Flowcharts connected to branching decision trees. Risk assessments were listed next to mitigation strategies. For the first time in 3 days, my mind felt clear. The pain was still there. A low, constant hum beneath the surface. But it was no longer a debilitating fog. It was fuel. The next morning, my first call was to a contact I had in the film industry. I needed an actress, someone talented, hungry, and most importantly, discreet. He gave me a name, Chloe Hayes. Her headshot showed a woman with a passing resemblance to Eleanor. Same hair color, same bone structure. Her resume was a string of off Broadway plays and walk-on roles in failed television pilots. She was perfect. I met her in a sterile coffee shop, a world away from either of our lives. I didn't tell her the whole story. I told her I was testing a new immersive security protocol for high-net-worth individuals and needed a simulated crisis actor. I offered her $50,000 for what would amount to a few hours of work. Her eyes, which had been wary and cynical, lit up with a desperate hope. She agreed without a single question. Next was the location. My fortress had a secret. Years ago, during the construction of my house, I'd had a state-of-the-art safe room built into the sub-basement, accessible only through a hidden panel in my home study. It was soundproof, with its own ventilation, plumbing, and a direct, secure fiber optic line. It was designed to protect my family from the outside world. Now, it would be used to protect the outside world from a member of my family. With Leo's help, we spent an afternoon converting it from a shelter into a cell. We installed a new magnetic lock I could control remotely. We stocked it with food, water, and basic necessities. And on one wall, we mounted a large, commercial-grade monitor, wired directly to the secure network. Then came the most critical part of the plan, my own creation. The Apex Secure System. It was my Chekhov's gun. They thought my home was my sanctuary. I would turn it into their stage. I spent an entire night locked in my study. The low hum of the servers, my only company. My fingers flew across the keyboard, writing new code, creating subroutines and backdoors that only I knew existed. I created digital ghosts looped video files that could be triggered remotely, showing an empty bed, a quiet hallway. I built an algorithm that could convincingly degrade the footage, adding digital artifacts to make any tampering undetectable to a forensic analyst. I was no longer just a CEO. I was a god in a world of my own making, programming a new reality. The final piece was the bait. I needed to control Silas's timeline. To force his hand, I called a junior accountant at my company, a nervous young man named David, into my office. I knew from Leo that David was one of Silas's sycophants. I put on the performance of my life, playing the part of a broken man trying to hold his company together. I let it slip that I was about to liquidate a huge stock portfolio to free up cash, a move I framed as a desperate measure to stabilize the company after my personal tragedy. I knew David would run straight to Silas with the news. The prospect of that much liquid cash, suddenly accessible, would be a temptation. Silas couldn't resist. It would make him greedy, and greed would make him reckless. The pieces were all in place. My strategy was set. The system was designed. The actors were hired. The stage was dressed. I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in what seemed like a lifetime. It was the calm of a commander on the eve of a battle he knows he will win. I was in my study, running a final diagnostic on the security overrides. When my phone buzzed, it was Leo. His voice was tight, stripped of all emotion. "Rufus, there's a problem." My stomach clenched. "What?" "I don't know how, but they know something's off. They're spooked. My source says they've changed the timeline, the plan. Whatever it is, it's happening tonight." He paused, and I could hear the sharp intake of his breath. "The whole damn show is going live tonight. Are we ready? Are we ready?" Leo's question wasn't really a question. It was a final systems check, a last look before leaping from the plane. The intricate, multi-layered plan I had spent the last 48 hours architecting on my whiteboard was designed for a week from now. I had built in redundancies, planned for contingencies, and timed every step to the second. Now, all of that was gone. The timeline had collapsed from a week into a few short hours. There was no more time for planning, only execution. A strange calm washed over me, the kind of hyperfocus that comes when the stakes are absolute. The fear, the doubt, the 100 what-ifs, they all vanished, burned away by the cold fire of adrenaline. My complex system had been reduced to a single, binary objective: success or failure. "We're ready," I said into the phone, my voice a low, steady baritone that betrayed none of the storm raging inside me. "The show goes on. Tonight." I hung up. The performance had begun. My first act was to find Eleanor. She was in the grand living room, a glass of deep red wine in her hand, staring out at the city lights. She looked like the perfect portrait of a grieving widow to be, though she didn't know it yet. She was dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, ready for a dinner out with Silas, a celebration. I now understood of their impending victory. The sight of her, so calm and beautiful, a serpent in my garden, sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. I walked over to the wet bar, my movements measured and deliberate. I took out a bottle of the Cabernet she loved, the ridiculously expensive one we'd been saving. "Let me get you a top-up," I said, my voice smooth. "Practiced. You look like you could use it. Long day." She turned, a faint, condescendingly sympathetic smile on her lips. "The longest? Thank you, honey." My back was to her as I uncorked the bottle. My hands were steady. From my pocket, I palmed a small, clear vial Leo had given me. A powerful, fast-acting sedative, odorless, tasteless, and utterly untraceable after a few hours. I poured the wine, and with a single, fluid motion, emptied the contents of the vial into her glass. The liquid dissolved instantly. I swirled the glass once, letting the dark red wine climb the sides, hiding any secrets. I turned and handed it to her. For a terrifying second, our eyes met, and I felt a flicker of the man I used to be the husband who loved this woman. I saw a flash of our wedding day, of Olivia's birth, of a decade of shared memories. I crushed it. That man was dead. She and Silas had murdered him 2 days ago. I was merely his ghost, here to collect a debt. "To better days," I said, raising my own glass. "To better days," she echoed, and took a long .com. Slow sip. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. I made small talk, discussing Olivia's day, a meaningless news story, the weather. I was an actor on a stage, reciting lines while a bomb ticked silently beneath the floorboards. I watched her, my senses on high alert for any sign. Her sentences began to slow. She blinked a few more times than usual. She brought a hand to her temple, rubbing it gently. "I'm suddenly so tired," she murmured, her voice thick. "You've been under a lot of stress," I said, my voice a low, soothing hum. She took one last sip of the wine, and her eyes fluttered shut. The glass slipped from her fingers, landing with a soft thud on the plush Persian rug, a dark stain spreading like blood. I caught her before she could fall. Her body was a dead weight in my arms. The target was incapacitated. I carried her through the silent house, down to my study, The hidden panel behind the mahogany bookshelf slid open with a faint hiss. The cold, recycled air of the stairwell, leading to the sub-basement, washed over us. Each step down was a step further away from the life we'd built, and a step deeper into the new reality I was creating. As I was securing Eleanor in her new home, Leo's team was already in motion half a state away, on a winding, deserted stretch of mountain pass. They were professionals. A silent crew of former stuntmen and logistics experts, a black sedan, identical to Eleanor's down to the custom wheels, was pushed into position at the edge of the ravine. A weighted dummy sat in the driver's seat. A small, remote-detonated charge was placed on a gas line. At precisely the right moment, Chloe Hayes, my actress, arrived in a separate car. She was pale, her face a mask of nervous energy, but her eyes were focused. She was dressed in a replica of the outfit Eleanor was wearing. Her role was simple: be seen, but not too clearly, by the first responders. Leo gave the signal. The sedan was released. It rolled, slowly at first, then gathered speed, plunging over the edge and tumbling down the rocky embankment in a sickening crunch of metal and glass. À moment la terre, the charge went off. A dull thump, followed by a bloom of orange flame that lit up the dark canyon. The 911 call was made by a passing motorist a mile down the road. The stage was set. My own phone rang an hour later. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring 3 times before answering, just as a genuinely sleeping person might. Hello. My voice was thick with manufactured sleep. Is this Mr. Rufus King? A grim voice asked. And then I performed. I didn't just act sad. I became a vessel for every ounce of pain and betrayal I had felt over the past 3 days. I channeled the gut-wrenching agony of seeing those photos, the soul-crushing horror of hearing that recording. Me Daniel. My broken pleas. My final, shattering scream of NO into the phone. It was all real. It was just directed at a different crime. I threw the phone across the room, where it hit the wall and shattered. I collapsed to my knees. Then, for my final audience, I swept a priceless Ming vase from its pedestal, letting it crash to the floor in 1,000 pieces. Silas arrived 20 minutes later, summoned by a text I'd sent him that just said, "Call me. Emergency." He found me sitting amidst the porcelain shards, my head in my hands. He played his part perfectly. The concerned friend, the stoic partner. He put a hand on my shoulder. His words were a comforting balm of empty clichés. I'm here for you. Buddy, we'll get through this. Whatever you need. But I could feel it. Underneath the performance, I could feel the thrum of his victory, the sickening glee of a predator who had just watched his rival fall. He thought he was the wolf. He had no idea he was the sheep. Meanwhile, miles away, in a silent room 20 feet beneath the earth, Eleanor was waking up. I watched on my tablet, a god's eye view into my creation. She stirred, her hand going to her head. Her eyes fluttered open, then widened in confusion. She took in the seamless gray walls, the lack of windows, the single, heavy steel door. Her breathing quickened. Panic began to set in. And then, the large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It wasn't a movie. It was a live feed from a local news channel. A solemn-faced anchor was standing in front of a graphic that read, "Tragic, local accident," and behind the anchor was a live shot of a mangled, slightly burning car being hoisted from a ravine. Her car? A chyron at the bottom of the screen read Eleanor Vance, wife of Apex Innovations, CEO Rufus King. Pronounced dead at the scene. The sound that came out of her mouth was not a scream. It was a raw, guttural noise of pure, uncomprehending terror. She scrambled off the cot, stumbling toward the monitor, her hands outstretched as if she could push through the screen and stop the lie. I switched the feed on her monitor. Now, it showed a split screen. On one side, the news report. On the other, a live feed from a micro camera hidden in my study. She saw me, and she saw Silas, his arm around my shoulder, his face a mask of perfect sorrow. She watched him comfort the man they had both just destroyed. She saw his lie, and for the first time, she must have felt the first cold tendril of doubt. She was dead to the world, and her partner in crime was comforting her husband. The next morning, the second phase of my plan engaged. Two men, large and imposing in dark, off-the-rack suits, walked into the accounting firm that handled Apex's secondary books. They approached Arthur Finch, our mild-mannered, perpetually nervous head accountant. They flashed badges that looked impressively, terrifyingly real. Arthur Finch, one of them said, his voice a low rumble. FBI. We need to have a chat about some irregular offshore transfers originating from your client, Mr. Silas Thorne. The color drained from Arthur's face. He was a weak man, a man who followed orders. I was counting on his instinct for self-preservation to overwhelm any loyalty he had to Silas. The agents, two ex-cops Leo had on retainer, laid out copies of the initial fund transfers Leo had uncovered. They offered him a one-time-only deal, full cooperation, in exchange for immunity. Arthur folded in less than 5 minutes. Just as things were going perfectly, an unexpected variable occurred. My neighbor, a nosy woman named Carol, called the police. She reported seeing a strange, unmarked utility van outside my house the night of the accident. For a moment, the world stopped. A single, uncontrolled element could bring the whole thing crashing down. The police called me. I answered, my heart a block of ice. I calmly explained that I'd had a burst pipe, an emergency plumbing issue. I told them the name of the company, a fake entity I had created for just such a contingency. I promised to forward the invoice. I hung up, my hands slick with sweat. The controlled error had been contained. My foresight had held. Now it was time to spring the trap. Arthur Finch, now my terrified pawn, made a frantic call to Silas. They know he squeaked into the phone, his voice trembling with genuine fear. The feds were just here. They're asking about the offshore accounts. They're going to freeze everything. I watched Silas on my own security feed. His office bugged with audio. I saw the flash of panic, followed by the glint of pure avarice. His escape hatch was about to close. His only thought was to grab the money and run. He told Arthur to stay calm, then immediately logged into his system. He was so arrogant. He thought my grief had made me blind, the company vulnerable. He didn't know that as he began to initiate the multi-million-dollar wire transfer, he wasn't moving money to his escape fund. He was transferring it to an account I controlled, an account that was being monitored in real time by the actual FBI, whom Leo had anonymously tipped off with an airtight package of evidence. He was the mouse, and his greed was pressing the lever that would snap the trap shut. I watched his fingers fly across the keyboard. He clicked confirm. The system flagged the transaction. A red light blinked on a computer screen in a federal building downtown. The trap was sprung. The arrest was beautiful in its brutal efficiency. I watched it all on my monitor, a silent observer in my digital panopticon. One moment. Silas was leaning back in his chair, a triumphant smirk on his face. The next, his office door splintered inwards as a federal tactical team swarmed in. He was ripped from his chair. His face slammed against his expensive desk. The shouts of "FBI, get down" echoing in the room. The look on his face was not fear. It was utter, complete, system-shocked confusion. He was the master of the universe 1 second, a cuffed criminal the next. He couldn't comprehend how his perfect plan had so catastrophically failed. And in the room below my feet, Eleanor watched it all on her monitor. She saw her lover, her co-conspirator, her ticket to a new life, being hauled away in handcuffs. She saw his face, not filled with concern for her, but with selfish, pathetic bewilderment. She saw the truth. She had never been his partner. She had been a tool, and now that she was dead, she had been discarded. The foundation of her betrayal, the belief that this was all for them, crumbled into dust. She slid down the wall, her face pale, her mouth opening in a silent scream before she finally broke, collapsing into a heap of ragged, hopeless sobs. The machine had worked. Every gear had turned. Every piston had fired. Silas was neutralized. Eleanor was broken. I felt a quiet, clean satisfaction, the cold, precise catharsis of a perfectly solved equation. I stood up from my desk. The show was over for them. But there was one final scene. I walked to the hidden panel and descended the stairs. The air grew colder. The silence more profound. I stood before the heavy steel door. With a tap on my phone, the magnetic lock disengaged with a heavy, definitive thunk. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Eleanor looked up, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a new, dawning horror as she finally recognized her jailer. "Hello, Eleanor," I said, my voice calm, even, and utterly devoid of the love that had once defined it. "We need to talk." "Hello, Eleanor. We need to talk." The words dropped into the sterile, soundproofed silence of the room like stones into a deep well. They were not angry, not accusatory, just heavy with the weight of an entire world of lies. She flinched as if I'd struck her. Her tear-streaked face, a mask of dawning, abject horror. The final piece of the puzzle had just slammed into place in her mind. This wasn't a random kidnapping. Her prison wasn't arbitrary. Her jailer was her husband. The man she had sentenced to a life of grief and ruin was now her God, her judge, and the sole architect of her new reality. I stepped inside, and the heavy steel door hissed shut behind me, the magnetic lock engaging with a deep, final thunk. The sound seemed to suck the remaining air from the room. I didn't walk toward her. I stood by the door, maintaining the distance. A general surveying his conquered territory. My territory was this small, windowless room, and the shattered woman cowering within it. "Rufus, what is this?" she whispered, her voice a raw, broken thing. "What have you done?" A bitter, humorless laugh almost escaped my lips. What have I done? I walked over to the small table in the center of the room and placed my tablet on its surface. I swiped the screen alive. The first image that appeared was the photo of her and Silas, their hands intertwined at that dimly lit restaurant, her face alight with a joy I hadn't seen in years. "You want to know what I've done?" I asked, my voice still unnervingly calm. "I learned to see. I learned to look past the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect life I thought I had built, and see the rot underneath." I swiped again, The photo of them kissing outside the hotel. Her head was tilted back, her eyes closed in ecstasy. I did what you and Silas thought I was incapable of doing. I continued, my voice a low, clinical monologue. I looked at the data. I analyzed the variables. And I saw the truth you both went to such extraordinary lengths to hide. I tapped the screen one more time, and the audio file Leo had captured began to play through the room's hidden speakers. Silas' voice, thick with arrogance. He's blinded by his own narrative, and then hers, the voice of a ghost, conspiring in her own resurrection. Just as long as Rufus believes you're dead, everything will be ours. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was absolute. She stared at the tablet, then at me, her mouth slightly agape. The final vestiges of denial crumbled from her face, replaced by the stark, ugly truth of her exposure. She had been so certain of my blindness, so confident in my grief. The realization that I had seen everything, they heard everything, and had been pulling the strings all along, was her true undoing. You were my wife, I said, the words tasting like ash, the mother of my child, and you conspired with the man I called my friend to murder me in every way but physically. You were going to let me grieve for you, let our daughter grieve for you, while you drank champagne on a beach bought with my money, my work, my life. I finally walked toward her then, stopping just out of her reach. She flinched away, pressing herself against the cold, seamless wall. So now, I said, looking down at her, not with hatred, but with a chilling absence of any emotion at all. You get to make a choice. It's the only choice you have left. I laid out the two paths. To my voice, as steady as a surgeon, explaining a procedure. Option 1 is simple. You stay here. The door remains locked. The world will continue to believe Eleanor Vance died a tragic victim. In a few days, the air filtration system will be shut down remotely. No one will ever find you. You'll just cease to exist. A ghost in a box. Her eyes widened in terror, a fresh wave of tears spilling down her cheeks. Or, I continued, there is option 2. You can live. But Eleanor Vance stays dead. She is gone forever. In her place will be Abigail Marsh. Abigail Marsh is a 42-year-old woman with no family, no history, and a menial job waiting for her in a forgotten little town in Montana. She will live a quiet, simple, anonymous life. She will never contact anyone from her past. She will never use her real name again. She will never try to leave. If she breaks any of these rules, if Abigail ever causes so much as a ripple, then I will be forced to tell Olivia the truth. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. This was the point of the dagger. And that is the real choice I'm giving you. Eleanor, how will our daughter remember you? Will she remember her mother as a loving, wonderful woman who was taken from her too soon, a hero she can look up to for the rest of her life? Or will she learn the truth that her mother is a living, breathing monster who tried to destroy her father and abandon her for money? She broke. The sound was a wrenching, animal sob of utter and complete defeat. All the fight, the arrogance, the deceit, it all shattered, leaving behind only the raw, weeping core of a human being who had lost everything. It took a long time for her to be able to speak. I'll do it, she whispered, her voice hoarse, her face buried in her hands. I'll be her. Abigail, Then she looked up at me. One last, desperate plea in her ruined eyes. Please, Rufus, just let me know that she's okay. Olivia, that's all I ask. Let me see her. It was the first flicker of something that wasn't purely selfish. A single, dying ember of the mother she once was. And in that moment, I made a choice of my own. My revenge did not need to be absolute. Once a month, I said, my voice hard, but final. You will receive an envelope with a recent photograph. No names. No letters. No communication. Just a picture. That is all. That is the deal. She nodded, a wave of pathetic gratitude washing over her face. The next day, Leo escorted a pale, red-eyed woman with a new driver's license and a small bag of clothes to a bus station. She got on a bus heading north, and Eleanor Vance was gone from the world forever. The next 6 months were about rebuilding, not my company Apex Innovations soared. With Silas gone, I purged the rot he'd seeded in the upper management. Our stock price tripled. I was lauded in the financial press as a visionary, a resilient leader who had turned personal tragedy into professional triumph. They had no idea. The real rebuilding was at home. It was slow, painful work. It was holding Olivia when she woke up crying for her mom. It was learning to bake her favorite cookies because she said they tasted like mommy's. It was attending the father-daughter dances at her school. An island of awkwardness in a sea of smiling mothers. But slowly, painstakingly, the light began to return to her eyes. Her laughter, once a rare and precious sound, became common again. She was resilient. She was a survivor. She was my reason for everything. In a bleak, windswept town in northern Montana, a woman named Abigail Marsh worked as a waitress in a greasy spoon diner. She lived in a small, furnished room above a laundromat. Once a month, a plain white envelope would arrive for her at the post office box she rented. Inside, there was never a note. There was only ever a photograph. Olivia at her 9th birthday party, blowing out the candles. Olivia winning a blue ribbon at the school science fair. Olivia smiling, her 2 front teeth missing. On the first day of school, the woman would take the photo back to her small, lonely room, and she would weep. One night, long after the dust had settled, I sat alone in my study. I pulled up the core programming for the Apex secure system. I navigated to the encrypted partition where the fabricated video loops were stored, the digital ghosts I had created of Eleanor leaving the house. For a moment, I just looked at the lines of code, the architecture of my perfect revenge. Then, with a quiet finality, I highlighted the entire directory and pressed delete. A confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to permanently erase these files? I clicked yes. The secret was now mine alone, buried in a digital grave deeper than any police force could ever dig. The war was finally over. Years passed. They flowed by like a calm river, washing away the sharp edges of the pain, leaving behind only a smooth, quiet scar. Olivia thrived. She grew from a sad little girl into a bright, confident, and astonishingly kind young woman. She was at the top of her class, the captain of her debate team, and had an early acceptance to Stanford. My pride in her was a constant, steady sun in my universe. On the day of her high school graduation, I sat in the front row, a ridiculously proud father, trying to see the stage through a film of tears. She was giving the valedictorian speech. She spoke about resilience, about finding strength in loss, about the unwavering love of a parent who had been both a father and a mother to her. As the graduates threw their caps in the air, a sea of joyous, youthful optimism. My eyes scanned the crowd at the back of the field, and then I saw her, a woman standing under the shade of an old oak tree, well away from the other families. She was older, her hair a different color, her face etched with the lines of a hard life. She wore a simple dress and a baseball cap pulled down low, but I knew it was her. Our eyes met across the field, a distance of 100 yards and a lifetime of secrets. A jolt went through me, a ghost of the old, cold rage. She had broken the rules. She was here. My first instinct was to call Leo, to enforce the deal. But then I looked at her face. I saw no malice, no scheme. I saw only a desperate, aching hunger to witness this one moment, to see the beautiful woman her daughter had become. She thought I would expose her. I could see the terror in her eyes. But as I looked from her to our radiant, smiling daughter, I realized my victory was already complete. My victory was Olivia's happiness. Hurting Eleanor further would achieve nothing. I held her gaze for a long moment. Then, I gave her the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. Acknowledgement. Permission. Not forgiveness, but a moment of grace. I saw a single tear trace a path down her cheek before she turned and melted back into the crowd. A ghost once more. Later, as Olivia and I walked to the car, her diploma in one hand and her arm linked through mine, she was buzzing with plans for the future. I listened, my heart full. I had achieved my perfect revenge. Silas was in prison. Eleanor was living in a gilded cage of her own, making my company was stronger than ever. But I knew now that the real triumph wasn't in their defeat. It was in this simple, ordinary moment. Walking in the sun with my daughter. Her future, a bright, open road before her. I had set out to serve a cold dish of revenge. And in doing so, I had learned that the ultimate justice wasn't about tearing someone else down. It was about having the strength, the resolve, and the quiet grace to build a better world for the ones you love.